Welcome to the Friday edition of Clay Studies, the clay class on the internet. We're going to finish up our sugar and creamer sets from last week. Going to cover a lot of stuff today. None of it particularly well. Well, you know it. We're going to talk about how you do this technique called sgraffito with white slip. And we're also going to make some more pouring vessels and stuff like that. Jojo, thanks for coming in. Not Joe Jorgensen, are you? Spike Cohen? I'm kidding. I know it's you, Thomas. Valerie, thanks for coming in. Let me know if the stream is working or not working or anything like that. It looks like it's going good on my end. YouTube always looks like it's going good, though, so it's hard for me to tell. Unlike Zoom, which is kind of the opposite, it's always going poorly. Like if this was a Zoom meeting at this point, I would be getting that flashing notice about how my high CPU usage was affecting the meeting or whatever. And it's just like, what? This is the only thing I have open. It's not like I'm like have a, Word document open and like a, Final Cut Express thing going or something. What was that program called? Final Cut Pro? Is that the Adobe movie thing? It's ridiculous. All right, so I'll stop complaining and get to pro-planing. So that piece that I just showed you that has that white stuff on it, for instance, like this. Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me know that it's working. The way you accomplish that is you need to own two kinds of clay, and they need to be of a contrasting color. So theoretically, they could be two different red clays, because some of those red clays, there's a big difference there between like Hawaiian red and Old Joe's red. There's a pretty big difference there. But probably the safest bet is to use a red and a white clay. And you can build with the white clay and then use the red clay as the sgraffito slip. Or you can do the opposite, which is what I have, building with the red clay and then using the white clay as a sgraffito slip. But, whichever order you want to do that in, it's going to be fun. Freeform used to have small bags of clay, like little 5-pound bags, if even that. Maybe they were like 2-pound bags. Sorry, I got to itch my nose. I don't know if they still have those, but I know that Freeform used to have them, and those were really cool for stuff like this because you could pick up one of. You don't have to buy a whole bag. You could pick up one of those, and you could experiment. So I don't know if they have that option anymore, but if you want to try like a white clay for sgraffito, like what I'm using, B-Mix is probably a really good option. B-Mix fires to a crisp white color. And it's also fine grained, by which I mean there's not grog in it. So it's going to work pretty well as a sgraffito slip. If you want to go the opposite direction, if you want a red slip to carve through, the Hawaiian red is a super nice red color. Some of the other reds, like Old Joe's red and stuff like that, they get a little bit desaturated when you fire them. But yeah, the Hawaiian red's a really nice red. There's probably others too. And I think the Hawaiian red is also fine grained. I don't think it has grog. I could be wrong. It's been a long time. So that's my opinion on those two things. This white I'm using here is made from B-Mix. And on this note, I have a lot of white clay and a lot of red clay. So if anyone wants, if you're not able to get a small bag from Freeform, send me an email. You can come over to my office with a peanut butter can or something, and we can do a trade. You can pick up some slip or something. Yeah, I have white or red. My red is going to be Old Joe's kind of red, so it's not going to be like super good, but good enough. Like I said, the best red that I can remember at least is the Hawaiian red. It's like a Laguna clay. And you just make it like normal slip. I mean, I could use this if I was making stuff out of B-mix clay, I could use this as a glue. But I'm using it as a kind of a paint. And if you remember the glazes, if you ever were in one of the classes when we used to have real classes, you kind of aim for that kind of thickness. I mean, it's probably hard to tell. So in this case, the way I made this, I had some B-mix clay, and I have my smoothie maker. It's one of those cheap smoothie makers. BJ, good afternoon. And I have a cheap smoothie maker that I got off Amazon. They're like $15, the Hamilton Beach cheap blender thing. And basically, you cube up some B-mix. And by cube up, I mean you make little cubes that are about pea-sized. And then you blend those with water in the smoothie maker. And that's the best way to do it. If you don't want to do that, you could use like a fork and try to blend the clay into the water, but the smoothie maker works best. If you're trying to make a lot, like in a 5-gallon bucket, then you have to buy one of those attachments for a drill called a plunger. And it basically looks like a helicopter propeller that's on a stick or something. And that's how they do it there. But yeah, that's basically that. It's less complicated than the Terra Sig because you don't have to add the other stuff into it. But yeah. So you want a contrast in color that you make slip from. And then you use it as a paint. And you paint it onto the piece when the piece is leather hard. And it takes... And it'll take several coats if you do this. But leather hard and then about 5 coats usually, it seems like. Put it in a container. Well, JoJo, if that works for you, it works. Especially if it's like a container that you can really shake or something like that. I could see that working. But yeah. So leather hard, you paint it on, and I'll probably at some point I'll be able to paint some of this onto a piece today, so you'll see that. It paints, it's pretty similar to the glaze. It doesn't dry very fast. Like you have to wait about half an hour between coats. It takes a long time to dry. But it's pretty similar to the glaze. You just try to paint it on evenly with a fan brush sort of thing. And it does take a handful of coats. So I have a piece inside that should be pretty much ready to go because otherwise it takes long enough that I wouldn't be able to start slipping a piece and then have it done by the end of class. It takes a pretty long time for that stuff to dry well. So that'll be fun. And this is like 5 coats or so onto the red clay. And then the sgraffito is when you carve through it to make these lines. That's the sgraffito. And it's a really good carving project. If you haven't carved yet, I do recommend you at least consider making one of those citrus juicers because it'll be really good practice for carving. And yeah, the citrus juicers are really the best first carving project. So I would recommend you try that first. But this is a kind of a good place to go next. All right, I'm kind of just talking about nothing. I apologize. I'm going to form one of these cylinders first. That first piece I held up, it started like this, and then I shaped it into that more kind of volumetric form. So we're going to do that first. And this is probably going to be a little bit of review. I think we've done a little bit of this in this class so far. But yeah. So I've had this in a bag since last week, and it's dried a little bit. It's dried enough that I went ahead and painted that slip in there. And the reason I did that is so hopefully as I stretch it out, it doesn't crack too bad. Like this will kind of work some moisture into the clay as I stretch it. But yeah. Ideally, you want to do this stretching out part when the clay has stiffened up a little bit, but maybe not as much as mine has. Mine still bends. I mean, you can still see it's pliable. It's just maybe like a touch stiffer than what I would prefer. And for that sort of thing, basically think about where you're going to put the kind of widest point. And I would start with that. So if the widest point is going to be like here, this is like 2/3 up. I'm going to go ahead and start here and using a ball stick. And the ball stick really is the best tool for this. You could use your fingers, but nothing's as good as the ball stick. And I have not done work to this since last week. So where we left off last week is where this is at, okay? So use that ball stick, and we're going to stretch out the clay at about what the widest point will be. Kind of the shoulder of this form. Kind of shoulder. And just take your time. Work it slowly. The area where that seam is at, where we attached our cylinder, that's going to be a weak spot. So especially watch that, because as that area gets stretched, it will kind of thin out a little bit more than the rest of the piece will. So that's kind of like the bellwether kind of line there for how far you can stretch these out. And it might be helpful if you prop yours up a little bit. It can be hard to looking down on it to do it evenly, but just rotate it. Take your time. You should be all right. Okay. And now I'm going to just start widening and shaping the clay that's a little bit lower than that area. So just taking your time, stretching it out slowly, a little bit at a time, rotating it. And at this point, I'll start to do some vertical kind of pulling too. So this is a vertical ball stick action. And, this will take a little bit of practice. Probably the first attempt won't go exactly the way you want it to. So like everything else, it's a technique which is in principle pretty easy, but in practice a little bit harder. These Friday meetings on YouTube, I'm going to make them public from now on. So if you follow the channel, you should get like a notification that it's going live or whatever on Fridays. So theoretically, you shouldn't even need the link. You should be able to, it should kind of give you a notification on your YouTube account or whatever. If you have such a thing, if you're like, if you do that, I don't think they're going to be like throttling me. I'm not like, I'm not doing anything too interesting. But, I'll keep sending out emails, but I'm just letting you know that theoretically, I think if I do that, you shouldn't even really need me to send you a link. And after this class, I'm going to do a trash can firing here at my office. I'm going to do one of those coyotes and some other stuff. I got a berry bowl I'm going to do. Some of the stuff from earlier in the semester that I've kind of had on the back burner. I'm now going to put it onto the front burner, which is actually in a trash can, apparently. So you can stretch these out a pretty good amount. Maybe if the clay is a little bit thicker than 1/4 of an inch, you can go even further. But this is probably about as far as you can go with the 1/4 of an inch clay thickness, because you do thin it out as you do this. And you'll kind of notice as you're handling it, it'll get easier. Like you'll notice it's easier to accidentally press it in or something and make it look like a weird bruised orange. So that's kind of like your sign that you're getting the clay a little bit on the thin side, and probably you don't want to go further. Probably. Cool. So something cool about the ball stick thing, when you do that inner seam, it gets totally smoothed away. Well, not up here. You can still see it up top. Since I didn't ball stick, there's still a seam here. But even that's not too important, because I'm going to go ahead and cut most of this off anyway. Oh yeah. So the bottom, where the walls meet the base, at this point, if you look down there, if there's gaps, there's not gaps down there, but if there's gaps on yours, this would probably be a good time to go ahead and roll out some little coils and get them down there and seal those gaps up. Otherwise, your piece is not really going to be like food safe if your goal is to have it food safe. Now, if you look down there and it's tight, which is like what mine is, that's good. Just paint some slip down there. Pretty much just paint some slip down there. Where do you get the ball stick? Well, 1 second, I'll tell you about that. Now, if you're not making a sugar container, you're making like a bigger vase or something. Once you're a little bit bigger than this, you really do need to put a coil down there, even if it's tight, just to reinforce that joint. But at this scale, it's not necessary. So that's something to consider. The ball stick, Valerie, it's a kind of a DIY tool. Sorry. You can buy the wooden balls with holes already in them on Amazon. This is, I think it's like an 1.5-inch ball with a 1/2-inch hole in it. And you can also buy the wooden rod on Amazon too. So what you do is you get the wooden rod the same diameter as the hole. That way, when you buy them, you just glue them together. This is called a dowel rod, a wooden dowel rod. So what I would do is I would look up wooden ball with hole on Amazon, and I would find a wooden ball that's about this size, which I think is 1.5 inches in diameter. And then whatever the hole size is on those, then you're going to search for wooden dowel rod and then put in that diameter, like 1/2 inch or whatever. And they come in, I think the balls come in like a pack of 4 or 5, and the rods come in a pack of 4 or 5 also. Yeah. At the buildings, we had like kind of a collection of these, but unfortunately, you know how it is. The ball stick. Supposedly they sell ball sticks at Michael's as part of like a pottery toolkit, but I've never seen it. And I think they're smaller than this too, which is okay. And in fact, probably in some ways better. But yeah, I have not actually seen that. I've searched in Michael's for it, and I have not seen it. Maybe online you could order it or something. I don't know. Okay, so after you shape this, if you like this neck, that's fine. You can leave that. Oh yeah, we'll be talking about pottery anatomy a little bit too today, I guess. Basically, pottery anatomy, you know, very much like the human body. Like you got the belly, the shoulder. If it looks kind of vaguely like it, you'd call it a shoulder, call it a shoulder. But this is called the neck. If you like that, you can leave it. I'm going to go ahead and cut off most of it. I'm going to have a much shorter neck down to like here. So the way you do that, if you've ever thrown on the wheel, it's going to be kind of similar to trimming like that, but except totally by hand. So you got to brace your cutting hand, your Ritchie cutting hand, and then slowly rotate the piece around. Every Happy Days reference I can get in today is victory. Ritchie cutting hand. Come on, that's good. And, you know, it's usually not super even. You got to kind of finagle it a little bit. That looks like it'll be all right, though. And then you're going to go back over that line with your knife tool. If you want to trim off more, you can trim off more. It's not too bad. But, you know, like almost everything else with clay, you can always trim off a little bit, and it's not too bad. But trying to build more it's a lot harder. You know, maybe not harder, but just more time consuming. Okay. Now the next thing, since we didn't make a lid for this, at this point, you're going to go ahead and roll out a slab, 1/4 inch thick, just like the piece. And then you're going to make a lid by flipping this over, tracing around it, and then cutting out that disc. And then that disc will become the lid. We maybe could have done that last week. It just depends. A lot of the times when you shape this stuff, the circle up here ends up being a lot different than the bottom. So yeah. So let me go ahead and get a slab rolled. I forgot my clay. I think that's enough. Okay. I don't know how I managed to forget my rolling pin every single class, but somehow I do. All right, I think we're going to be okay. I think this is going to be just barely big enough here. All right, so go ahead and trace gently. Hold your needle tool or X-Acto knife, whatever you've kind of started using for this sort of thing. And then cut out this disc. And this disc will become the lid. Cool. Try to move it without disfiguring it. At this point, I would put go ahead and let the lid stiffen a bit. And then you're going to want this to dry out a little bit too. You want this to be like well into the leather hard stage of dryness before you paint the slip onto it. So basically, once this is rigid and it can't bend, you can probably go ahead and try a coat of slip. If this is excessively wet, you'll notice the slip will just be really, really streaky, like almost like it just doesn't want to stick to it. And more than likely, that's because your piece is still a little bit too wet. The slip doesn't really want to stick to it yet. So something to think about. Probably by the end of class, this will have dried enough that I can put a coat of slip on this. Okay, so I have one of those already slipped up and it's inside in front of a fan because I'm desperately trying to get it dry, and I think it's probably dry now, so I can go grab it, and then we'll start talking about the Sgraffito technique. Okay, so this is Old Joe's Red clay, just like the other kind of forms. And that white slip, this is like 5 coats of that. And frankly, it probably could use another coat. Like as I look around it, I don't know how well it comes through on the video, but you can almost kind of still see some darkness under the red in some areas. So ideally, I would put another coat of white on here, but that's all right. We'll go ahead and pretend that I did. Now, the other thing is that I need to wash my hands, because if there's red clay on your hands as you handle this white clay, the iron from the red clay will get kind of onto it, and you don't want that. So it might be a good idea to get a studio rag so you can kind of wash your hands, kind of dry them off a little bit, because now we're going to get into the realm of, you need to have your hands clean when you handle this stuff, pretty much. The realm of planning, cleaning, hygiene and planning. Is that what it's called? Well, whatever it is. In your toolkit, the same loop tool that we used last week, the double-ended loop tool, where one end is like that and the other end is flat. That's probably the best tool in the toolkit for this. You could use the bigger loop tool also. You're just going to have bigger kind of shapes and stuff. I've seen people use like styluses for Sgraffito, so like a pen kind of looking thing, like a kebab skewer, that sort of stuff. That'll work. There's a lot of tools that'll kind of work for this, but the loop tools are probably like the kind of the old standby. And so once again, the double-ended loop tool is probably the best one. I don't have one. I got this tool, so that's what I'm going to use. And another useful tool is a circle template. And the circle template's useful for basically you have a circle and it kind of looks like a dartboard or like a bicycle wheel. And you can place your piece on it, and you can use the spokes on that wheel to kind of space out your design, as it were. So it's kind of optional. You don't have to. Depends on the design you're doing, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and make one real quick just to kind of show you that concept. So using my compass tool, my paper with the holes in it, and a piece of notebook paper, and a pen that is maybe dying, make a circle. And this circle is big enough that I can place my piece in it, and I can kind of center my piece by looking around it and making sure that it's not too to the left or right of that circle. So that's useful. Now I need those spokes though, so I can space design elements on my thing. So kind of like when we made the hexagon, if you want to divide this into this circle into 6 evenly spaced quadrants. Wrong side. The way you do that, this is review from the hexagon. You go around the piece like this, and I'm using the radius of the piece to make these lines. So these are, theoretically, these will be 6 evenly spaced lines around my circle. You don't have to do 6. You could do 4 or 8 or whatever. Like I said, this is optional. You might not need one of these. You might, whatever your design or whatever, you might not really even need this sort of thing. It's basically just like introducing you to the concept, I guess. And you'll see people will make these from plexiglass, because the plexi, since it's transparent, you can do pretty much what we're going to do, but you can place it on top of the piece, and then you have like the same thing going on. Okay. So you center your piece now inside of this circle. You got these radiating lines now, and you can use these to basically divide your piece into 6 equally sized quadrants. I don't think quadrants is the right word there, but whatever the word would be. Kind of see that concept? And that helps you to evenly space something. So let's say you want to do those triangle-y things that I just showed you. You'd put one within this quadrant, one within this quadrant, one within that quadrant. And then theoretically, you would have 6 evenly spaced designs. I think I've seen people online using like red watercolor or something like that on top of these. Like you could do like a red watercolor line here, because that just burns off in the kiln anyway. But I don't have any watercolor, so I'm not going to do it that way. Sorry, my phone. So that's the circle template that helps you evenly space your designs. I don't know what the right term for it is. So probably the main reason I think it's a good idea to start with the citrus juicer is because when you're carving, you don't really have to come up with a design or something. You know, it's just you have to make those channels, and it's not too bad. The challenge with the Sgraffito is really that you have to. Sorry. The challenge with the Sgraffito is honestly that you have to come up with a design, and it's hard. It's a lot harder than you would think. I would suggest just looking up pottery from the past is a good place to start. Or, you know, Google searching Sgraffito in clay, and Google searching like historical Sgraffito and stuff, and just kind of like saving images that you like, having a folder of those images that you like, and then you can reference those shapes and stuff like that. And especially if it's your first attempt at this, I would say try to stay kind of like geometric. Now, if you really like figurative work or anything like that, that's fine. You can definitely do that. But as far as I've been able to tell, usually if you do geometric shapes, it's a little bit maybe easier to start with. So, for instance, here, these like V kind of shaped things. And I think I'll probably just go ahead and do more V-shaped things. I can't think of, I did one with little sunshine kind of shaped things, like half circles, and that's fine too. Okay. So I have my piece here. I have my loop tool here. Pull up the camera a little bit. And let's go ahead and start. I'm going to shift over to the side so that hopefully it's easier to see what I'm doing. Yeah. I'm just going to do the V things again. So here's this line here on my template. I'm just going to follow that line up the piece. And I'm going to lightly start sgraffitoing. So you'll kind of see here, that's mostly white. There's a little bit of red in there, but you're doing this really lightly. Just it's mostly white. You don't have to dig into the red clay. Now, I'll send you an example where a guy does kind of gouge into the red clay, and that's totally legitimate, but you don't really have to. At a minimum, you're just trying to take that white clay out. So be really light with this tool, unless you don't want to. And you know, generally the same kind of principles that we did when we were carving our citrus juicers. Bracing your hands, and even using two hands to hold the tool, like what I'm doing right here. Just going really slow. Taking your time. Now, these lines, they're really helpful for like horizontally spacing out your designs, but unfortunately, they don't do anything for vertical. So you gotta still, gotta kind of be careful about your vertical placement. And yeah, this is just a technique. It takes a lot of practice. As long as you're going really light, if you screw up, you can paint white over that screw up. I mean, it'll take a couple coats, but you can cover it. But if you're carving in a manner where you're like really digging into the red clay, it's going to be much harder to fix any of those kind of screw ups. Paper templates probably you could use if you want to like trace around a shape. That's totally legitimate, I would think. At this point, a lot of these lines, they might not be very clean. So you can go over them with your tool again. And kind of get them a little bit more crisp looking. And something to kind of play with is having areas where you have thicker lines, having shapes maybe where you completely remove the white, and also having kind of thin lines. Maybe you use like the stylus, or like you try to just barely get your loop tool on there. And those sort of line thickness and planar kind of elements, those can kind of help you create depth visually. And kind of nice compositional aesthetic considerations like that. So having some lines be thicker than others, that's definitely that's kind of like a compositional tool to help keep the thing looking interesting. Dear Lord, that was a bunch of nothing. What a bunch of vocal nothing. Mm-hmm. Trying to think if there's another shape I can do here. Oh yeah, the those YouTube videos with Maria Martinez, those designs, those are kind of cool. Now those weren't sgraffitoed, but you could still kind of be inspired by those, I think. Like, for instance, that painter Basquiat, a lot of his symbols and stuff that he would use apparently were inspired by like homeless, kind of homeless coding and stuff that the homeless people would leave on like signs and stuff. Because apparently he had been homeless before he made it big with Warhol or whatever. But wherever you can get your inspiration from on this stuff, just kind of go with it. Grayson Perry would be a ceramics artist with a similar kind of aesthetic there, where a lot of like layered symbols and patterns and stuff. Although, I mean, Grayson Perry would do some sgraffito, but a lot of his stuff is like decals. Yeah. Ugh, well, that one kind of went south. like a surfboard slash rays of the sun behind it, huh? So yeah, I mean, the best advice I can give you for this really is to try to do one of the citrus juicers first. It's that's really the best thing I could say. Mm-mm-mm. If you want to take like a band of the white off down here at the bottom, you can use a rib tool. And you can remove material this way. You could also keep using your loop tool and scrape off clay. Whatever you think is going to work better for you. You could use a damp sponge to clean up these sort of band kind of areas too. You do need to be a little bit careful because the damp sponge will kind of stain the white stuff pink just because of the red clay that's on it. So you got to be a little bit careful there, but You can use a damp sponge to like clean up that sort of stuff. If there's like fogginess still on the band. And maybe we take off a band up here too. Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, this is one of those techniques where you spend a lot of time kind of just cleaning up little things. So it's definitely it's a pretty time consuming technique, but very classic, very reliable, all that sort of stuff. Sgraffito. People have asked, is this something that I should clear glaze once it's fired and stuff like that? And you can clear glaze this sgraffito work. I would caution that, in my experience, most of the red clays don't look very good with clear glaze on them. Even the best red, the Hawaiian red, even that suffers from the clear. The clear glaze, it just always kind of takes red clay and it kind of desaturates it and makes it a more kind of murky brown, kind of unsatisfying color. It's not horrible, but it's definitely not as good as it was, sort of thing. So I would recommend the Sgraffito surface that you just leave that unglazed. You could glaze the inside of a piece like this, and that will make it food safe, especially if you're trying to keep sugar in here. That's going to be fine for that. But I would recommend not glazing Sgraffito work. Now you'll notice if you look this up on YouTube, there's going to be a lot of people who use underglaze to do their Sgraffito. So rather than using the white clay to make the slip, they'll use underglaze like Amico underglaze or one of those matte underglazes. So not glossy, matte. And in those cases, you probably can go ahead and use clear because the underglazes look good with clear on them. They don't really suffer. But if you're just using red clay as your colorant, it's not really, it just doesn't really like the clear. So you'll see what I mean when you do it. And then you're like, what the hell? This looks like shit. And it's like, well, yeah, because the clear glaze just doesn't like red clay. Other sorts of variants on this you could do. White clays, like the B-Mix. If you buy metallic oxides, the cobalt carbonate, the copper carbonate, the stuff that I use in my trash can, you can mix those in to the white clay slip, and you can get colorant that way. So that's a variant you could do there. You could put cobalt carbonate in this, and you could get a blue color instead of a white color, and stuff like that. You could even get black, although the best black is going to be underglaze, from what I've kind of been able to tell. So if you want black, Amoco makes the jet black underglaze, and I would say that that's probably the way to go there. Laguna makes that black mountain clay, and you could probably use that as Sgraffito, and you can see how that turns out. That might be interesting to test. Honestly, using the black mountain clay as Sgraffito might be the best use for it, considering how badly that stuff dunts and stuff like that. Um, if your slip is the same clay as the piece, Valerie, the Sgraffito is not really going to show up. It needs to be a contrasting clay. Freeform used to sell these like little bags of clay that had a couple pounds in there. I don't know what that was about. I don't know if they sell them anymore though. But those were ideal because you could pick up one of those and you could try that as a Sgraffito slip. Unfortunately, at this point, you might have to buy like a whole bag of clay if you want a contrasting color. Alternatively, if this is something you want to try, send me an email because I got a lot of red slip and I got a lot of white slip. So if you send me an email, we could work something out and you can come pick up some slip from me. And yeah, I have the B mix, so I can make really good white slip. My red slip is going to be mostly Old Joe's red, so it's not going to be like the greatest red, but it'll do, you know. But my white slip's going to be fine. All right, so let's go ahead and call that good enough. Where's my lid to this? And the lid will probably be a little bit easier just because it's flat. You don't have to worry as much about carving in the round or whatever. So if you have like a screw up or something that you want to cover up, as long as you're carving, pretty lightly into the clay, it's not too hard to do that. All right, and we can put a knob right there in the middle. So something else we need to do to this thing is put a ledge, put a ring right here so that it fits onto our lid and then doesn't slide around. Or so the lid fits onto the piece, I mean. So we'll do that real quick too. And then we'll make our creamer. I'm going to real quick go grab some coffee, so I'll be right back. Getting kind of brisk out here. Okay. Okay, this ledge we need to put on the underside of our lid here. Basically, it needs to be 1/4 of an inch within the edge so that it'll sit on here and then it won't really jiggle around too much. And you can typically eyeball that. You don't really need to like measure stuff necessarily. Just kind of eyeball about 1/4 of an inch within that exterior thing there. And then score this ring thusly. Is this supposed to rain or something today? I'm gonna look that up. It's getting all overcast. Weather. 20% chance of rain. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to roll out a coil, attach it here. That'll become a ledge kind of thing that we can then use to make sure our lid doesn't move around. Okay, so roll out a coil like this. and score the coil also. This this beginning of your coil, go ahead and bevel that and score it. So cut it at an angle. And the end of the coil, as you come back around, you're going to bevel that also and score it. Put some slip. It's going to look something like this at this point. And, we've done this a couple times with attachments like this. We're going to use our X-Acto knife and basically do this kind of stitch looking score all along the exterior of the coil and also the interior. And you want to make sure that you score down into the lid. It's not just the coil, you're scoring into that lid too. So now do the interior also. Okay, and once you've done that, let me see if I can find a rib tool that I want to use. Oh, here we go. And then I'm going to use my rib tool, just one of the straight edges here, and I'm going to go right over that joint between the lip or the coil and the lid. Do the inside too. Just taking off the white slip from the side of my lid here with the rib tool. So at this point, if the ledge isn't, if it's too big or something, like it doesn't fit into the piece, you see how it doesn't really want to go in yet? Totally all right. Just basically with your rib tool, just shave a little bit off. And as long as it's pretty close, you're going to be okay. If it's dramatically off, you might have to do another, you might have to like rip this off and then make another ledge, but as long as it's relatively close, you should be okay. In fact, it's a little bit preferable if it's kind of too big at first, because that way you can really kind of control by just shaving a little bit off, and hopefully it'll still be kind of tight. If it fits right away and it shifts around a lot, I mean, that's not the end of the world, but it's maybe not ideal. Not much play there. That's good. Okay. So a lid like this, it doesn't necessarily have to have a knob, although I think it's a good idea to go ahead and do one here. And the way I've been doing the knobs for these is basically they're just coils. They're just coils of clay that I kind of shape into a tapered kind of shape and then attach them. Just taking a little chunk of recycled clay here. So I'll kind of pinch one side here, one end of it. Kind of just making a little cone pretty much. Now, these knobs, you cannot have them come to such a fine point, unfortunately, because that's not enough material to attach. So you have to cut that tip off. And you want there to be like at least 1/4 of an inch of material here. So you got to cut that tip off. And then score the surface right there. And then also score the middle here where the knob's going to sit. Go ahead and put a dollop of slip on there. Hopefully that's not too much. Too much slip will, yeah, it's gonna too much. I put a little bit too much slip there, so it kind of bleeds out. Oh well. All right. So something like this, you're going to want this, like pretty much everything else we've made. You're going to want this to dry in a bag for about 72 hours. Check on it every day. Make sure there's not cracks developing. But yeah. The ledge on the underside of this lid here, after that's stiffened up quite a bit, it's probably a good idea to put a layer of slip there, kind of like what we did in the bottom of our jar, our sugar jar. I'm actually going to go ahead and do this, hit this one more time here. All right. So the jar is essentially wrapped up. Take a look at the creamer next. Okay. So we're going to shape our creamer also. If you saw that landing page screen before I started the video, there was a creamer there. I don't have one out, but hopefully you saw that picture. The spout on the creamer is going to be made from this shape here. And you see how this shape, it takes up about the top half of the cylinder. So my shaping, I'm going to have that take place all down here on the lower half. I'm not going to ball stick up here because I don't want to mess with the shape and too much. But I am going to do ball stick once again. Just kind of looking at my spout template, this area underneath where the spout sits. So I got to do a similar thing here since my clay's kind of stiffened up a touch more than what I ideally want. Put a little bit of slip on the inside of this. And then that'll hopefully let me stretch out the clay a little bit without cracking it. Okay, so same deal here. Just ball stick and slowly press out the clay. Just try to keep it even. All right, so kind of a similar shape, just more constrained to the bottom half of the piece. You see that unfinished vertical seam here? Maybe I should grab a creamer so I can reference it. I'll be right back. So the next thing we're going to do is a thing called darting. And we're going to dart in order to get this one of these sides here to kind of come in a little bit, kind of like a little hump. This is somewhat optional, although it kind of usually adds to the aesthetics of the piece, I would say. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It looks like my stream's getting all choppy, so if it's getting crappy, I apologize. Let me know. Okay, so the way that I make that hump kind of line is a thing called darting. And darting is basically removing a triangular section of clay and then folding the clay inwards to give it a shape. Apparently, they do a similar thing in textile design. So if you've done that, it's pretty much going to be the same. I don't have a paper template for this shape, but if you want to make a paper template for this, that's a good idea. The dart that they use to make that kind of hump shape is called a whale tail dart. And here, I got to look at it. Sorry. And it looks like this. Yeah. Kind of a whale tail. Does that make sense? You see why they call it that? You can usually kind of eyeball this, and as long as it's pretty even, pretty symmetrical, you're going to be fine. And you'll notice I'm putting that right on top of that unfinished seam, right on top of it. So I'm going to cut that out, and it's not even going to be there anymore. So that's kind of a trick, so you don't have to deal with that seam. Let's go ahead and cut it. Cross-eyed. I'm trying to cut at a basically perpendicular angle to the wall of the clay. You see that? Just like 90 degrees. It can be hard to do, so it's not super important, but trying. And this this kind of flat area down here, I'm also going to cut into the wall about 1/4 of an inch. Can you see that where I'm doing that? See that? On both sides. And that helps the clay kind of slide on top of that thing. Just put a little bit of moisture there. I'm going to score the 2 sides now. Like that. I pushed on my form there. Apply slip. And then we're going to bring that together. And you can kind of see how this will slide on top of that. And that making those incisions will kind of assist the clay to do that. So you bring those together. And then go ahead and rib this surface. Rib that seam on both sides. Get it looking all nice and seamless. So darting, that's like kind of like the first darting thing we've done this semester, and we'll do more, trust me. There's kind of an infinite variety of darts, but they're typically going to be kind of rectangular, triangular shaped, kind of like that whale tail shape, kind of, somewhere in the neighborhood of a kind of triangular shaped looking thing. Now, the whale tail dart, this spot down here, you will usually have a little opening. That little dot there, you see that? That's kind of a hole. And that's okay. That's kind of part of this dart is that's there. And we'll fill that up in 1 second. I'm just going to use my fork tool and smooth the underside of that. You could use, there's a wooden tool in your toolkit that has an end like that, use that, or your finger. I mean, it's conceivable you have to put a coil in there, especially if you have like gaps, but as far as I can tell, that's not really the case. Now this hole down here though, we are going to plug with a little bit of coil. I'm going to get a little bit of wet clay. And make a shape like that. And where is that hole? Oh yeah, there it is. And basically I'm just jamming that into that hole, and on the inside smoothing the clay. I'm going to take off the excess here, or not. There we go. And now that hole is plugged nicely. And on the inside, it feels smooth. Cool. Okay, this spout template is it's a little bit wider than 3 inches here. It's like 3 1/4 from corner to corner, and it's a little bit less than 3 inches tall. And similar to the other spout template, the way I made this, folded paper, draw half the shape, cut it out, unfold it, and that way you have a symmetrical shape like this. The corners here and here, these are useful. You use these to line up the template on the lip of the form. So it is useful to have corners like that. And once again, this is a little bit more than 3 inches across and a little bit less than 3 inches tall, this template here. And similar to the citrus spout template, unfortunately, you got to use notebook paper so you can kind of bend it and attach it to the piece. So you got to be really careful with it. I can't believe I haven't broken this yet this week or ripped it. Famous last words. So directly across from the dart, you're going to try to line up your spout. Just like directly across from it. And you get it kind of wet, get the paper kind of wet so it'll stick. And you can see the corners, the way those corners go on that lip. And then over here too. And that helps you to line up the spout template good. Well, and then using an X-Acto knife or your needle tool if you prefer, go ahead and trace around this template. And then you can take it off carefully. And similar to the dart, I'm going to try to cut this at a just kind of neutral perpendicular angle. I get super cross-eyed when I try to come down on it like that. Oh, God. It's like giving myself astigmatism or something. Okay. Mm-mm-mm. All right. So, very similar to the citrus juicer spout. A little bit different shape, but very similar principle, right? Um, we need to roll out a slab of clay now, and then use that same template to cut out this, basically that shape that we just cut out from our form. I'm just doing some quick and dirty wire wedging here. Slamming this little ball of recycled clay down, cutting it in half, doing it again. Not the best wedging technique, but they call it the quick and dirty for a reason. Okay. Let's roll this puppy out. Mm-hmm. Okay. You need your spout clay to be very pliable. So use fresh clay, or if you only have recycled clay like me, make sure you add some water to the surface and compress it like that. And then also go ahead, and I'm going to do the other side too. But if your clay is fresh, you probably just compress one side and that's good. The spout, it does need to be fairly wet clay though. We're going to bend it and kind of contour it and stuff. So we want it to be pliable. All right, going to cut this shape out now. What the hell? Jeez. Super stuck. Cool. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and bevel now the exterior edge. Try not to take too much off. I think I may have. Gonna go and score this now. And then this lower portion of the spout that attaches to the body, we're going to bevel that also. Cut that corner off there. And then try to pick this up without stretching it out. And then, just like you did with that paper form, you're going to try to get this on here in the same orientation. Maybe pre-bend it a little first. That'll help. Kind of pre-bend it a touch. Try not to stretch it out, though, when you do that. Those corners, they can line up on the lip, theoretically, again. Not too bad. So before we start shaping this, make sure that the spout's going to be really nice and stuck to the piece. And basically, I'm going to rib the surface a bit and try to blend that clay together. Mostly on the outside for now. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth and stuff like that. We basically just want to get it stuck enough that we can form it without accidentally ripping it off the piece. So the slip is, it's acting as like basically mostly just a lubrication for my rib tool. I mean, it's also useful because it kind of presses some of it into the joint, I guess, but more than anything, I'm just using it for lubrication. So I'll use a damp sponge now and kind of remove that extra slip that I painted down. Because like I said, mostly just lubrication for the rib tool. I do have some slip here though. That's I'm going to be stretching this area quite a bit. So basically I'm just kind of preemptively putting a little bit of moisture here so this clay hopefully does not crack too bad when I stretch it. Cool. So the inside in there, there's, maybe you can see it, there's a fairly good gap. So I'm going to have to put a coil in there to reinforce that joint. And that's okay. I'll do that once it stiffens a little. But basically, I'm confident that it's stuck here well enough that I can shape it now. And the whole goal with shaping your spout, if your spout is oriented like this, it'll work. You'll just have to quickly pour, sort of thing. And even if you're fast, as you come back up, it'll probably kind of run down the side. So with spouts, just like with the citrus juicer, it's kind of a good idea if you can get this edge to a more horizontal angle, something that kind of leads off the away from the piece. That way the liquid will more easily kind of leave the piece without coming back and dribbling down the side. So this is kind of why you need this to be fairly wet clay when you make your spout. But basically just support it with your left hand. And then start working the clay with your other hand. And see how it starts to go a little bit horizontal. And every couple of passes, you're going to want to come back over the lip and kind of compress the lip with your finger. And even if your clay is fresh, you can expect a little bit of stress fractures to occur from stretching it like that. That's just kind of the nature of the hand building and doing this sort of thing. And that's all right. Just paint some slip on that, let that slip dry out. And then you can kind of smooth that with a damp sponge and a rib tool. And you may even have, a more significant crack that'll need a coil or something into it. But as long as it's not just like ripped in half, you should be all right. So at this point, go ahead and be really careful with the spout and just let it dry for a bit. I got to put a coil into that joint in there, but otherwise it's not too far off. So the handle, it's nothing too complicated, although handles in general are kind of complicated. One of the reasons that you do the whale tail dart is because it gives you that little ledge there, and you can put the handle there, and it just helps you to stick the handle on a little bit easier. Let me see if this completed one over here is good. So that ledge there lets me put the handle on, and it kind of makes it a little bit more of a smooth transition and smooth attachment. It's really useful once you're making bigger pitchers and stuff like that have big handles. That ledge is super, super useful. Smaller handles like this, it's not that important, but it'll be nice. And you can use a ribbon of paper like this to kind of like guesstimate how long you need your handle to be. About 8 inches, it looks like. Seems like it might rain. This strap kind of handle, you can use a slab. If you have a slab out, you can cut a ribbon and do it that way. Or you can roll out a thick coil. So I kind of already know I need about 8 inches, so I can cut off some of this. So I just don't even have to deal with it. And then using my paint mixing stick, I'm just going to flatten this down to about 1/4 of an inch. About 1/4 of an inch thick on this. And, you know, usually these won't be particularly straight edged, so you can come back and cut off if there's any kind of weird dog bone looking stuff going on. And I'm just going over that edge with my sponge, trying to even it out since I cut it. Go ahead and do that over here too. Cool. And then you're going to kind of just place the handle like that. It doesn't have to be the exact shape. You just want it to stiffen up in kind of close to the shape that you need. When you put the handle on, you should still have a little bit of flexibility to it. So just kind of have it about the shape you want. And you got to let this stiffen up for about 5 minutes. So while that handle is stiffening, and so we're not going to finish these today. We'll have to finish them next week, pretty much. But that's okay. Just letting you know. While that handle kind of dries a little bit here, I'm going to start painting slip onto this piece. And honestly, this piece could be a little bit drier. So we'll see we'll see how streaky the slip is. Yeah, I mean, it could be a little bit better. It's all right for a first coat. You'll kind of see, even if I'm really gentle with it, it's just like it's a little bit streakier than ideal. And that's just because the clay still kind of has some wetness to it. So it's not really sucking up the liquid from the slip. The slip is it's not as readily sticking to the clay. But for a first coat, it's not that big of a deal. If you want, you can burnish the red clay before you paint the white slip onto it. You can do the polishing stuff on the red clay first if you'd like. That's totally legitimate. I just have it mostly for time reasons. So get like a coat on there and let it dry. That'll probably take like an hour to dry enough to coat it again. You want the surface of these to be pretty clean. If there's like dramatic cracks or undulations on the surface, the slip is more than likely not going to be able to cover those up. This piece isn't too bad. It's got a lot of the little stress fracture sort of things, but those should be all right. I mean, maybe ideally I would smooth those out before I painted the white slip on, but like I said, time constraints. Give this handle another 2 or 3 minutes to stiffen here. I'm going to look up the weather and see if the chance for rain has changed. Oh, it did change. It's gone down. It feels like it's going to rain out here, though. Oh, it might rain tomorrow morning. That'll be interesting. As long as it's pretty light, I should be able to do class out here. If not, I'll be in the office tomorrow. Inlay Dungeon. I'm going to weather.com here. Hold up. Friday, 10% chance of rain right now. Saturday. Yeah, it looks like by the end of the class tomorrow, it's over a 50% chance that it'll rain. 9 a.m. to noon tomorrow. Looks like by the end it should maybe rain. 60% chance of raining. Oh boy, I hope it's light. I mean, I have an umbrella that I'm under, so as long as it's light, I should be all right. Yeah. I want this handle to stiffen just a little bit more. We got another minute or two while this handle dries. So if you have any questions about this stuff, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to grab some water and coffee, and I'll be right back. No questions. Does that mean is the stream totally down? Is like something like that going on? I'm assuming that's the case. Thanks, BJ. So next week we'll be finishing the creamer probably for like the first half of class, and then for the second half of class, I don't know, but we'll rig up something. Get those requests in. I wonder if the reason this isn't drying is because there's a little bit more humidity in the air or something like that. I wonder if something along those lines is going on. So I'm going to score this area here since the handle is going to attach here. Just going to preemptively. Do you ever throw a handle? Do you mean pull the handle? Is that what you're talking about, BJ? The thing where you pull it like that? It's been a while. I think probably before too long we'll end up pulling a handle. Yeah. Well, the next handle we'll do, we'll pull it. Because there's another way of making a handle where you start with kind of like a chunk of conical clay and you kind of pull it with water like this repeatedly, and you can kind of stretch that into a handle. Yeah. Pulling the handle. So scoring the handle here, you're going to score the bottom area where it attaches. And then the top area, you're going to score there. And then also this underside here. This underside, because that underside sits on that surface. Handles like this, you want them to be a little bit stiffer before you put them on, but I think this will be okay. You want to be able to pick it up without it wobbling too much. You do want there to be a little bit of bend to it still, so you can kind of correct as you need to, but it'll be okay. And now I'm just placing it, and I have my hand on the inside supporting it as I press along this area up here, and then also down here. If I can get my hand, I can't get my finger in there, so I just gotta trust that the clay is rigid enough that it won't deform. You'll notice here the bottom of the handle doesn't go all the way to the floor, and I would recommend that you similarly do that you not go all the way to the floor with the handle. It just becomes very break-offable in that scenario. Like you'll pick it up when it's dry and set it down, and it'll bump that area or something, and the handle will just totally crack off. So I would say it's highly advisable that you not go all the way to the floor with your handle. I know it may sound a little bit counterintuitive, because you might be thinking like, the floor will help support it, but you really don't want to do that. I would highly advise against it. So if the handle is excessively moist, it'll want to kind of pull off the piece. But this looks like it's all right. I'll just kind of watch it, be gentle with it, but it should be all right. Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the class here. Like I said, look forward to finishing this next week. We'll do some more Sgraffito on the creamer, so there'll be more Sgraffito demo in the near future. But yeah, so that's the finishing the creamer and the sugar project. Mostly finishing it, like 90% finishing it. If you have any questions, you got about 30 seconds to get them in. BJ, thank you for coming in. I appreciate that. I hope you guys have a good weekend. Send me, any questions, any requests you have, or anything like that. The slip thing, if anyone wants to try a contrasting color of slip, but they don't want to buy another bag, send me an email, and we'll work something out. All right. Have a good weekend, guys.